The violent bang of the door shutting right in front of me rang out across the quiet residential street. Jessica, my eldest daughter, had just closed me out coldly, without even a hint of compassion. I then walked to the second house, the one owned by Michael, my middle child. He barely opened the door, slipped a wrinkled $50 bill into my hand, and shoved me away, murmuring something about how helping me could damage his professional image. 2 children, 2 refusals, 2 sharp wounds driven straight into the heart of a mother who had sacrificed her entire life for them. But when I approached the third door, the smallest house, farthest away from the wealthy neighborhood, everything shifted. Daniel opened it, my youngest son, the one who became a teacher earning a pitiful salary the rest of the family looked down on. Standing beside him was Sarah, the daughter-in-law everyone despised because she had neither money nor a prestigious family name. They did not pause or question anything. They welcomed me inside from the freezing cold as though it was the most natural and moral thing in the world that night. As I sat on their old, sagging couch, I overheard them whispering in the kitchen about selling their wedding rings so they could afford food for me. They didn't realize I could hear every word. They had no idea who I truly was. And the next morning when my lawyer Robert arrived at that tiny house with a full security team, when the truth was finally revealed in front of everyone, the expressions on Jessica's and Michael's faces were no longer filled with arrogance or disgust. They were filled with fear, 'cause in that moment, they understood they had lost everything. Let me take you back to the very beginning, to the precise moment when I decided to carry out this test. To the night I realized that my own money had helped turn my children into monsters. It began 3 weeks earlier in my office on the 23rd floor. My name is Linda Miller. For 35 years, I built a textile empire that supplies the largest clothing chains across the continent. When my husband passed away 12 years ago, everyone assumed the business would fail. Our partners bet against me. Competitors waited eagerly, ready to divide what they believed would be the leftovers. But I did not fall apart. I worked 18 hours a day. I mastered every detail of the business my husband once ran. I negotiated with banks, overseas suppliers, and demanding clients who had no respect for a woman in this industry. I endured humiliations that would have crushed most people. And I didn't just survive, expanded the company 5-fold. And do you know why I did all of that? For my 3 children. So they could have a life I never did. So they would never experience hunger the way I did growing up. So doors would always be open to them through education and opportunity. Jessica studied in Switzerland. I paid more than $120,000 for her MBA. Michael attended an elite private medical university, and I invested $200,000 in his education. Daniel, my youngest, was the only one who chose a state university. He wanted to be a teacher. The other 2 ridiculed him for years because of that choice. I gave them everything: houses, cars, vacations, connections. Every time they called, I wrote a check. Every time they had a problem, I fixed it with money. I turned into nothing more than a walking ATM for my own children. But that January night, alone in my office, staring at the financial records, detailing the allowances I had given them over the years, something inside me finally shattered. Earlier that same day, I had received 3 phone calls. All 3 came from my children. Jessica wanted $100,000 to renovate her kitchen. Michael asked for $70,000 to invest in a business venture with a friend. And Daniel called, only to ask how my health was. That contrast struck me like a blow. 2 children who contacted me only when they needed money. One who called simply because he cared. In that moment, I made my decision. I would conduct a test, the ultimate test. I would disappear. I would pretend I was bankrupt, homeless, with nothing left. I would go to their doors and ask for shelter. I needed to see who would open their home, who would feel ashamed, and who would remember that I was their mother before I was their source of wealth. I asked Robert, my most trusted lawyer, to keep my secret. He tried to talk me out of it. He said it was far too dangerous and emotionally brutal for a 61-year-old woman. But my mind was made up. I needed the truth. I needed to see their hearts stripped bare, without money hiding what they really were. I locked my jewelry away in a safe. I dressed myself in old clothes from a thrift store, a faded gray coat that smelled of mothballs, stained pants, shoes with cracked, peeling soles. I rubbed dirt into my hands, left my hair unwashed for 3 days, packed my belongings into a torn plastic bag. When I looked at myself in the mirror, I barely recognized the woman staring back at me. I looked homeless. I looked invisible. I looked exactly how I needed to look for this test to succeed. The plan was simple, but merciless. I would walk to their houses. One by one, I would knock on their doors and tell them that I had lost everything. That I had nowhere left to go and only needed a place to sleep. Nothing more than that. Then I would watch, I would study their reactions, their words, the smallest gestures. Truth always reveals itself when people don't have time to prepare their lies. Robert arranged a burner phone for me. He told me to call him immediately if anything went wrong. He assured me there would always be a car waiting 2 blocks away and that the security team would be monitoring everything from a distance. But I already knew I would not call. This test had to be real. It had to be painful. It had to be authentic, because only through real suffering does a person's true character emerge. On the first night, I left my penthouse behind. I walked away from the warmth, the silk sheets, the panoramic view of the glowing city skyline. I descended 23 floors and stepped out into the street. The February cold hit me like a slap across the face. There was no turning back. I walked for hours. My feet blistered with every step. The plastic bag holding my belongings ripped apart, forcing me to carry everything in my arms. People avoided me on the sidewalks. Some stared with pity, others with open disgust. Most simply pretended I didn't exist, as if I were just another piece of street furniture. That night, I slept at the bus station. The stench of urine and despair clung to my clothes. An elderly woman shared a piece of stale bread with me. She told me she had been living on the streets for 5 years, abandoned and forgotten by her children. As she spoke, a thought echoed in my mind. Will this be me in a few years, if I don't act now? By the 3rd day, I was ready. Dirty, hungry, frozen. To my bones but ready, I knew exactly what I was about to do. First, I would go to Jessica's house, then Michael's, and finally, the small, modest home of Daniel and Sarah. I didn't know what awaited me, but I was about to find out. Jessica's mansion glittered like an obscene jewel in the heart of the city's most exclusive neighborhood. Golden gates, perfectly trimmed gardens, stone fountain at the entrance. I recognized every detail because I had paid for it. $200,000 from my personal savings. Given as the down payment when she married 7 years ago, I stood before the electronic gate. My legs trembling not just from 3 nights of sleeping on park benches, but from the weight of what I was about to face. I pressed the intercom, a buzz followed, then silence. I pressed it again. Jessica's voice came through the speaker, cold and metallic. She didn't even ask who it was. In an annoyed tone, she said she wasn't buying anything at the door. I told her it was me, her mother. There was a pause. Too long. Then the gate clicked open just a few inches. I pushed it and walked up the stone pathway I had helped design myself. Every step felt like cruel irony. The front door opened before I reached it. Jessica stood there, but she didn't step outside. She positioned herself in the doorway, blocking the entrance as if I were a bothersome street seller. She wore a salmon-colored athletic outfit that likely cost more than most people earn in a month. Her hair was flawless. Her nails freshly done. Everything about her radiated wealth, comfort, and emptiness. She scanned me from head to toe with an expression I will never forget. It wasn't worry, wasn't shock, Was discussed. Mom, she finally said, stretching the word as though it burned her mouth. What are you doing here? It wasn't really a question. Sounded more like an accusation, as if my presence itself required justification. I told her the story I had prepared. I said I had lost everything. That the company had gone bankrupt. That creditors had taken my house. That I had been living on the streets for 3 days. That I only needed a place to sleep while I figured out what to do next. My own daughter listened without a single change in her expression. When I finished, she glanced over my shoulder toward the neighboring houses. She was more concerned about who might see me standing in her driveway than about anything I had. Just said. That single gesture pierced me like a rusted blade. Mom, this really isn't a good time, she said, lowering her voice. Robert has an important dinner with business partners tonight. I can't deal with situations like this right now. Situations. She reduced me to a situation like a plumbing issue or a broken appliance. I begged her, I hate admitting, that I did, but I needed to see how far her cruelty went. I told her it would only be for one night, that I would sleep anywhere, the maid's room, the florist's garage, anywhere at all. I just needed a roof over my head. Jessica slowly shook her head. The diamond earrings on her ears caught the light as they moved, those same earrings I had given her for her last birthday. $5,000 worth of precious stones dangling from the ears of a daughter who claimed she had no space for her own mother in a 6-bedroom home. You can't stay here, Shay said firmly. This would damage our reputation at the club. The neighbors talk, you know how things are. Then she added, besides, if you're truly having financial problems, the worst thing would be to stay around people who might judge you. It's for your own good, Mom. For my own good. She wrapped her rejection in fake, twisted maternal concern, as if slamming the door on me were an act of kindness. I tried to step forward. She stepped back, closing the door until only a narrow crack remained. There are shelters, she said, charities. We'll surely find help somewhere. And when you sort things out, when your situation improves, we can talk. But right now, I can't help you. I'm sorry. She wasn't sorry. That was the most horrifying part. Her voice carried no trace of real pain or guilt. She was simply eager to end this uncomfortable scene and return to her flawless world of appearances and shallow comfort. Jessica, I said, using her full name, please, I am your mother. I changed your diapers. I taught you how to walk. I paid for your education, your wedding. This house, everything you have came from me. Her face hardened, and then I saw something that chilled me more deeply than any freezing night on the street. I saw resentment, as if every sacrifice I had made were a burden she had long wanted to drop, as if my love were a debt she resented owing. Exactly, Mom, she replied, venom dripping from every word. You gave everything. You were always giving, always controlling, always deciding. God. And now that you have nothing, you expect me to give it all back like it was some kind of investment. Doesn't work that way. I have my own life. It's my own responsibilities. I can't carry your financial mistakes. The door shut. I heard the deadbolt slide into place. The sound of metal locking echoed like the lid of a coffin, sealing our relationship forever. I stood there staring at the solid mahogany door I had helped pay for it through a side window. I saw Jessica walk back into her living room, pick up her phone, dial a number, and begin laughing as she spoke. I walked away from that house feeling something worse than sadness. I felt hollow, as if a part of me had been left behind on the other side of that door. The daughter I raised, the little girl who clung to me during nightmares, the young woman who cried on my shoulder after her first heartbreak, she was gone. In her place stood a cold stranger who valued her neighbors' opinions more than her own mother's survival. I walked nearly 2 miles before reaching Michael's neighborhood. My feet were bleeding inside my broken shoes. Hunger made dark spots dance in my vision whenever I moved too fast. Still, I kept going. I had to finish this test. I needed to know whether all my children were the same or if any trace of humanity remained in them. Michael's house was more modern than Jessica's. Glass and steel. Sleek, minimalist, and emotionally cold, just like him. I rang the doorbell and waited. This time, there was no delay. Michael opened the door almost immediately, as if expecting a delivery. When he saw me, genuine shock crossed his face. "Mom?" he exclaimed. For a brief second, I thought he might be different. "What happened to you?" His eyes swept over my filthy clothes, my unwashed hair, the torn bag in my hands. He took a step toward me, and for a moment, I believed he was going to hug me. He didn't. Instead, he glanced quickly up and down the street just like Jessica. The same fear of being seen. Session with appearances. "Come in, quickly," he said, pulling me inside and immediately shutting the door behind me as if hiding evidence of a crime. I stood in the foyer. He didn't invite me further. In, he kept his distance as though my poverty were contagious. "What happened?" he asked again. "Where have you been? Why didn't you call?" I told him the same story: bankruptcy, losses, days on the street, the need for temporary shelter. Michael listened with his arms crossed. I could see his mind working, calculating, weighing options. He wasn't thinking about how to help me. He was thinking about how to get rid of me. In the fastest and least troublesome way possible. When I finished speaking, he let out a long, exhausted sigh as if I were a difficult patient in his clinic. "Not his own mother, Mom. I have a reputation to protect," he said. "I'm a cardiovascular surgeon. My patients are influential people, politicians, business leaders. If anyone finds out my mother is homeless, it affects my practice. You understand that, right?" "No," I replied honestly. "I don't." "Understand?" Michael pulled out his wallet. Italian leather. I recognized it immediately. I had given it to him for his birthday 2 years earlier. $800. He removed a few bills, $50 in total. He extended them toward me but didn't step closer, as if afraid I might contaminate him. "Take this," he said. "Go to a cheap hotel, rest, take a shower. When you look presentable, we can talk about how to fix your situation. But you can't stay here. I have surgeries early tomorrow. I need focus. I can't afford this distraction. His homeless mother was a distraction. I didn't take the money. I stood there, staring straight into his eyes, searching desperately for some trace of the little boy who used to run into my arms when I came home from work. The boy who once promised that when he grew up, he would buy me a big house, so I'd never have to work so hard again. That boy had died somewhere along the way, and I hadn't even noticed when the funeral happened. "Michael," I said, my voice breaking, "I stayed up entire nights studying with you for your medical exams. I brought you coffee at 3 in the morning when you were exhausted. When you couldn't afford textbooks that cost $500 each, I sold my jewelry to buy them for you. And now you offer me $50 and call me a distraction." Jaw tightened. The bills were still held out between us, forming a physical barrier. "Mom, it's not personal," he said in the same detached clinical tone he probably used when delivering bad news to patients' families. "I'm just not in a position to help you the way you need. I have my own family, my own expenses. I can't carry another person." Another person. That was all I was to him, not his mother. Not the woman who sacrificed her own dreams to finance. His just another person and inconvenience. I finally took the $50. Not because I needed it, but because I wanted to see if even that small, humiliating gesture would stir something inside him. It didn't. His expression remained calm. It's professional, distant, like he had just completed an unpleasant but necessary transaction. "Now I need you to leave," he said, pointing toward the door. "Seriously, Mom, I have to wake up early. Can't deal with this right now. When you stabilize, call me and we'll see what we can do. But you need to understand that I have limits too." He placed his hand on my shoulder, not gently, not lovingly, but firmly, guiding me, pushing me toward the exit. He was physically escorting me out of his life. At the door, he opened it and gestured for me to leave. The cold night air hit me once again. Take care, he said. And honestly, Mom, you should have been more careful with your investments. At your age, everything should already be secure. Shouldn't be happening. He was blaming me, saying this was my fault. That my homelessness was the result of irresponsibility. The son whose $200,000 education I had paid for was now lecturing me about financial management while throwing me out of his house. The door closed. This time, I didn't even hear the deadbolt. Michael had already walked away before I finished stepping off the porch. He didn't wait to see if I was safe. Kay simply shut the door and disappeared. I stood beneath the yellow glow of the garden lamp. The $50 lay crumpled in my hand. I stared at it as if it were poison. This dirty piece of paper was the value of my relationship with my son. $50 less than what he probably spent on a casual dinner. I slipped the money into my pocket. I would use it later, not for myself, but as proof. Proof that this had truly happened. Proof that my two oldest children had rejected me on the same day without hesitation. 2 doors closed. 2 children lost. I had one left. Daniel, my youngest son. The one who chose to become a teacher when everyone told him it was a waste of his talent. The one who married. Sarah, a girl from a humble family who had worked cleaning offices when they first met, was the one everyone in my family looked at with a mixture of pity and disdain. I have to admit something that shames me. I had looked down on her too, not openly, but in my heart. When Daniel introduced me to Sarah, I expected more. I expected someone from a good family, someone with useful connections. Someone who would elevate my son's status rather than keep him in what I considered economic mediocrity. At family gatherings, Jessica and Michael made cruel remarks. What a pity Daniel settled for so little, they would say. Imagine if he had met someone ambitious. I said nothing, stayed silent, let their poisonous words drift in the air without contradiction. Sarah noticed every time. She saw how her smile grew smaller whenever Jessica bragged about her trips to Europe or Michael mentioned his millionaire patients. She saw how Daniel squeezed her hand under the table, silently offering her strength. And I looked away, ashamed of my complicity. Now walking toward their small house in a working-class neighborhood. Far from the mansions of my other children, I felt the full weight of my hypocrisy. I had judged Sarah for not having money. I had found her insufficient, and she probably knew it. Every time she looked at me, I could sense my silent disappointment. Daniel and Sarah's home was modesta single-story building painted cream. Peeling in some areas, small garden bloomed with flowers. Sarah evidently tended herself. A wooden fence needed repair. Everything was simple, humble, and honest. No electronic gate. No intercom. Just a wooden door and a plain doorbell. I pressed it, and the chime rang inside. Footsteps approached. The door opened. Sarah appeared, wearing an olive green knitted sweater she had probably made herself. Her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. No makeup, no jewelry, except for her wedding ring, a thin silver band that probably cost less than $100. Her eyes widened when she saw me. Linda, she exclaimed, using my first name, as she always did. She never said mother-in-law. Or ma'am, just Linda. I had once found it slightly disrespectful. But now I understood. It was her way of connecting with me as an equal. My God, what happened to you? She asked immediately, and without waiting for an answer, she took my arm and gently pulled me inside. The warmth of the house wrapped around me, smelled of home-cooked meals, freshly baked bread, of a real home. Daniel, she called toward the kitchen, come quick, it's your mom. Daniel appeared, wearing a simple gray shirt and old jeans. His face went through a rainbow of emotions when he saw me. Surprise, worry, pain, and something I hadn't seen in Jessica or Michael's expressions, genuine love. Mom, he said, running toward me. What happened? Are you okay? Did anyone hurt you? Where have you been? His hands touched my face, my shoulders, checking for injuries. He didn't care about my dirt. He didn't notice my smell. He only cared that I was safe. Sarah had already disappeared. Inside, moving quickly, opening drawers, turning on the water heater. Daniel guided me to the sofa, an old piece of brown fabric with a patch sewn onto one arm. I sat and my legs finally gave way after days of endless walking. I told them the story again. It's the bankruptcy, losing everything, the nights on the street. Daniel listened with tears forming in his eyes. No questions about reputation. No judgment. About neighbors. No interrogation about how this had happened. Just an open, broken heart that absorbed everything. When I finished, silence filled the room. Then Daniel spoke. "You are staying here," he said firmly. "It is not negotiable. Mom, this is your house now." Sarah returned, carrying clean towels and clothes. "I heated water for you," she said gently. "We don't have a tub, only a shower, but the water is hot. Then you can eat something. You look very thin, but you don't have room?" I protested weakly, though my heart was already overflowing with an emotion I could not name. "You only have one bedroom. We will sleep in the living room," Daniel said without hesitation. "You take the bed. We're not going to discuss this." "No," I insisted. "I can sleep in the living room. You need your privacy." Sarah knelt in front of me. Her brown eyes shone with a warmth I didn't deserve. "Linda," she said softly, "you are Daniel's mom. Your family. Family doesn't sleep on the sofa when a bed is available. Please let us do this for you." The simplicity and sincerity of that request tore me apart. My other children had offered me money and excuses. This couple, who had so little, offered me everything they had without conditions or reproach. I bathed in their small bathroom with its chipped tiles and patched shower curtain. The hot water ran over my filthy skin, and I let myself cry where no one could see. I wasn't crying for the nights I'd spent on the streets. I cried for the years I had wasted valuing the wrong things. I cried for my two oldest children, to whom I had given castles, yet who had closed their doors on me. And I cried for my youngest son, who lived in this humble house, yet had opened his wide for me. When I emerged from the bathroom, Sarah had laid out clean clothes on the bed. Her clothes, soft gray sweatpants and a light brown sweatshirt. They were slightly large on me, taller than I was, but they smelled of cheap fabric softener and genuine care. At the small dining table, which barely fit between the kitchen and living room. A plate of food awaited me. Homemade vegetable soup, toast, a glass of orange juice. Nothing fancy, nothing expensive, but prepared with love and served with dignity. Daniel and Sarah sat with me. They didn't look at me with pity while I ate. They spoke of ordinary things. Daniel's students, one who had finally learned to read after months of effort. Sarah talked about the flowers in the garden that were starting to sprout despite the cold. They treated me like a person, not a tragedy. After dinner, while Sarah cleared the dishes, I heard Daniel whisper to her in the kitchen. He thought I couldn't hear, but the thin walls of their home kept no secrets. I sat on the sofa, pretending to watch the old television. Yet every fiber of my being concentrated on their conversation. "We don't have enough money to support 3 people. Daniel said quietly, "My salary barely covers the 2 of us." "No," Sarah replied calmly. "I already thought about it." There was a pause. Then the unmistakable sound of a drawer opening. "We can sell the rings," Sarah said. "We don't really need them. They're just symbols. Our marriage doesn't depend on 2 pieces of metal." My heart stopped. They were talking about selling their wedding rings, the only jewelry they had, the symbols of their commitment for me. "No," Daniel said, but his voice sounded torn. "They mean something to you." "They mean we love each other," Sarah replied. "And we will keep loving each other with or without them. Your mom needs us now. That is more important than any symbol. Tomorrow, I'll go to the pawn shop. They'll probably give us about $300. With that, we buy food for the month and see how we go on." $300. That was all their rings would be worth at a pawn shop. And they were willing to give them without hesitation. Meanwhile, Jessica had $5,000 earrings hanging from her ears and refused me entry. Michael carried an $800 wallet and handed me $50 as if it were charity. I love you. I heard Daniel say, his voice broken, I don't know what I did to deserve you. Nothing, Sarah replied gently. It's not about deserving. It's about choosing to do the right thing. Your mom raised you. She educated you. Now it's our turn to take care of her. That's how real families work. I closed my eyes tightly. Tears ran down my cheeks uncontrollably. This woman I had once looked down on who had cleaned offices to help with expenses because Daniel's teacher's salary wasn't enough. This was the only person in the world who understood the true meaning of family. They returned to the living room. I quickly wiped my tears and pretended to focus on the news. Sarah brought me a hand-knitted mustard-colored blanket. It's my grandmother's, she said, as she draped it over my legs. It always kept me warm. I hope it does the same for you. That night, despite my protests, they guided me to the bedroom. It was a small room with a double bed, an old wardrobe, and a dresser with peeling paint. The sheets were simple white cotton, washed so many times they had become soft as silk. On the nightstand, a wedding photo of them rested, Daniel in a suit clearly borrowed, Sarah in a modest white dress, likely bought on a discount. Both smiled with pure happiness, so raw and sincere that it hurt to look at them. Please rest, Daniel said, kissing my forehead as he had done when he was a child. Tomorrow we figure out what to. It's okay, she continued. I know your disappointment. I felt it every time your children looked at me with pity or disdain. But what you need to understand, Linda, is that love isn't about status, money, or appearances. It's about choice, about the heart. Daniel chose me, and together we choose to do the right thing. That includes taking care of you. Her words settled over me like a warm blanket, warmer than any I had ever known. I wanted to argue, to protest, to insist that I didn't deserve this, but the truth was undeniable. I did. Here in this modest kitchen with these humble, steadfast people, I was loved not for what I had, not for what I could give, but simply for being. I nodded, unable to find words. My throat tightened. Thank you, I whispered finally, the words trembling on my lips. Thank you both, for everything. She smiled softly. Tonight, just sleep peacefully. That's all we ask. You're safe here. That day, I watched. Daniel teaches students through the thin walls of their home, and I saw the joy in his. And as the morning light crept over the small wooden fence, I made a silent vow to carry this lesson with me. To never confuse wealth with worth again, and to honor the quiet, powerful humanity of Daniel and Saretha, children who had given me back more than money could ever buy. That I used the bedroom. I lay in bed listening to the faint sounds of their home. The creak of the old floorboards, the hum of the refrigerator, the soft shuffle of Sarah tidying up these ordinary noises. Felt like a symphony of normalcy and care. I realized I had been chasing illusions of wealth and prestige for decades, while the true richness of life had been sitting quietly in front of me. In the form of genuine love and selfless devotion, I thought about Jessica and Michael there. Polished facades and cold hearts, and felt a pang of sorrow for all the time I had invested in appearances, hoping to shape them into the children I wanted rather than accepting them as they were. Here, with Daniel and Sarah, I felt no pretense, no judgment, no expectation, only authenticity. I closed my eyes and let myself drift into the kind of sleep I hadn't known in years. A sleep unburdened by pride, shame, or fear, but filled with gratitude. In the warmth of that modest home, I understood at last that family isn't about inheritance or social standing or transactions. It's about choosing to give, to care, and to remain present even when there is nothing to gain, and for the first time in decades. I felt a quiet hope blooming inside, me a hope rooted not in wealth, not in status, but in the profound truth that love, when freely given, is the greatest legacy one can ever leave. I understood immediately. Today would be the day the illusion ended, the day the test concluded, the day the truth revealed not just who my children were, but who I had been all along. My hands shook as I hung up the phone. The sun hadn't risen yet, but in that dim, pre-dawn light, I felt a strange clarity, a mixture of fear, anticipation, and resolve. I dressed quietly, careful not to disturb Daniel and Sarah, and looked around their small, humble home. The chipped furniture, the worn-out floors, the patched cushions, all of it now felt sacred. It was real, it was life, and it was filled with love. This was the world my wealth and privilege had never taught me to see. I sat at the kitchen table, sipping the cheap coffee Sarah had poured, and thought about Jessica and Michael. I thought about their doors slamming, their wallets opening only slightly, their eyes calculating rather than loving. I felt sadness, yes, but more than that, I felt a deep, unshakable gratitude for Daniel and Sarah. Their hearts had held me when my own arrogance had failed. At 9 a.m. I would face the culmination of this painful orchestration, but for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel powerless. I had already learned the lessons that mattered. I had already found what I had been searching for. Real family, real love, real human connection. And when Robert arrived with the documents and the security team, the truth would be revealed. But the most important revelation had already happened. In that small house on that quiet morning, I had discovered where real wealth lives, and it isn't in bank accounts or jewelry. It is in hearts that care, in hands that give, in lives that touch others, even when there is nothing to gain. I breathed deeply, feeling the weight of both shame and hope, and waited. Today, everything would change, but some things, the things that truly mattered, had already been transformed forever. Everything was proceeding exactly as we had planned. There was a brief silence on the line. "Are you absolutely sure?" he asked. "As we move forward, there's no way to undo this." "I'm certain," I replied, with more conviction than I had felt about anything in my entire life. "I'll see you at 9. I ended the call and slipped the phone away. Sitting on the edge of the bed, I watched as the faint glow of dawn crept through the thin brown curtains. In just a few hours, everything would be different. The illusion would collapse, and I would have to confront the consequences of everything I had learned. I rose quietly and stepped out of the bedroom. Daniel and Sarah were still asleep on the couch. They looked painfully uncomfortable. Daniel's arm dangled off the side, nearly touching the floor, while Sarah's head rested awkwardly against the back of the sofa. Even so, their hands remained. Intertwined as they slept, I moved silently into the kitchen and made coffee. I found some bread in the pantry, toasted it, and set the table as neatly as I could. These small acts of service were the only gift I could offer them in these final moments before the truth shattered everything. Sarah was the first to wake. She noticed me in the kitchen and smiled, the kind of tired yet sincere smile that had become so familiar. "You're up early," she said, stretching gently so she wouldn't wake Daniel. "I couldn't sleep," I admitted. "I was thinking." She stepped closer and accepted the coffee I handed her. "Thinking about what?" she asked, curious but not intrusive. "About you," I answered honestly. "About everything you've done for me. About what you're willing to sacrifice." Sarah took a slow sip of coffee, studying me carefully over the rim of her cup. There was something thoughtful in her gaze, a quiet intelligence that suggested she understood more than she let on. "Linda," she said slowly, "can I ask you something?" "Of course," I replied, though my heart began to race. "You don't have to answer if you don't want to," she continued, "but something doesn't quite make sense. A woman like you with your experience and intelligence, how did you lose everything so quickly? And why did you come to us? On foot instead of seeking help another way?" I froze. Her tone wasn't accusing, just genuinely inquisitive. She waited patiently for an explanation. clearly having noticed the inconsistencies my presence carried. Before I could respond, Daniel stirred awake with a groan, his body stiff from the uncomfortable night. "Good morning," he said, rubbing his neck. "What time is it?" "Almost 7, Sarah answered, though her eyes never left mine. "We were just talking." Daniel stood and walked toward us, sensing the tension immediately. "Is everything okay?" he asked, glancing. Between us, Sarah softened her expression. "Everything's fine," she said. "Just a conversation." But I knew she suspected something. This woman so often underestimated. Who cleaned offices and nurtured flowers possessed a level of perception my highly educated children had never developed. "There's something I need to tell you," I began, but the words caught painfully. In my throat, Daniel placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "Whatever it is, Mom, we're here," he said. Sarah spoke again, her voice calm and steady. "Before you say anything, I want you to understand something. Doesn't matter what secret you're holding. Doesn't matter what kind of test you may have put us through. We've still opened our door to you. We still gave you our bed. And we would do it again." I stared at her in disbelief, my mouth slightly open. "You knew," I finally whispered. "I suspected," she corrected gently. "From the moment you arrived, your way of speaking, the way you carried yourself, some things just didn't add up." "Children who rejected me when I needed them most," I replied firmly. "Children who chose reputation and comfort over my safety while you and Sarah were willing to sell your wedding rings for me." Sarah intervened gently. "Linda, I understand your pain. I understand your anger. But disinheriting your children won't heal what's broken. It will only create more resentment, more division." "This isn't about revenge," I argued though. Deep inside, I knew revenge played some role. It's about consequences, about teaching them that actions matter, that you can't treat people like they're disposable and still expect rewards. Daniel sat down on the sofa, burying his face in his hands. "This is too much," he murmured. "I don't want your money, Mom. I never did. I became a teacher because I wanted a life with meaning, not one focused on accumulating wealth." "I know," I said, sitting beside him. "And that is exactly why you deserve it, because you don't chase money, because you understand it's a tool, not a purpose." Sarah knelt beside us. Sarah knelt down in front of us. Her gaze moved gently from Daniel to me. "May I suggest something?" she asked cautiously. "Please," I replied. "I need a clear and steady voice right now." "Don't make any permanent decisions today," she said softly. "Let Robert come. Let the truth come out. But don't rewrite your will just yet. Give yourself time. And give Jessica and Michael time too. Maybe when they are forced to face what they did, when they truly understand the consequences of their actions, something inside them might change." "They won't change," I said bitterly. "I know them." "You knew them," Sarah corrected gently. "But people can still surprise us, for better or for worse. Give me the chance to be wrong about them." Daniel lifted his head and looked at me. "Mom, if you really want to teach them something, teach them while you're alive, not through your death," he said quietly. "Show them what real love looks like. Show them forgiveness. You don't have to give them more money if you don't want to. That's okay. But don't erase them from your life completely. That kind of cut will hurt you more than it hurts them." His words pierced straight through me. This son of mine, this good man who earned less in a year than his siblings spent on luxury vacations, is teaching me lessons about humanity that I desperately needed.